Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today is a bonus piece of content that I wasn't planning, but I had loads of requests around free hit drafts and wildcard drafts. So I thought I would try and make a short-ish video covering both free hit and wildcard for those of you on chips this week and discuss the pros and cons of playing those chips this week. However, even if you're not playing a chip, I still think this should be a useful video because you'll see the kinds of players that I think you should be targeting and how you can navigate the upcoming weeks. If you want to see more content from me, drop a like on this video, drop a comment down below, make sure to subscribe, but without further ado, let's jump into it. So before we jump into looking at the drafts, I thought it'd be useful to just look at the upcoming landscape in FPL and see if you don't play the wildcard and free hit in the upcoming game weeks, are there better opportunities in the future? Like, what are the blanks and doubles looking like for the rest of the season? If you just want to skip to looking at the drafts, I completely understand that. You can use the timestamps down below, but hopefully you stick with me for the entirety of the video. This is the transfer algorithm for Mikel Topfam. I think it's incredibly useful looking at this ticker because it really allows you to visualize the upcoming blanks and doubles. Just to let you know what the numbers essentially mean, if the number is 1 on this ticker here, it means they have a guaranteed single fixture. If the number is 2, it means they have a guaranteed double game week. If there's a dash or the number's close to 0, it means a probable or definite blank game week. And then in between, it gives you a bit of an idea about the probability. So if, for example, it says 1.67, that would suggest that there's about a 67% chance that that team has a double game week in that week. So hopefully that makes sense. It allows you to just visualize what's coming up over the coming game weeks. Obviously, game week 26 and 27 has passed now. So if you just look from 28 onwards, we know about the blank in 28. We know about the double in 29, but I wanted to look after that. If you don't play the chips in 28 and 29, are there better opportunities in the future? And the short is I don't really think so. We have a double for Brighton and Newcastle, probably in game week 31. It could be, as you can see here, in game week 30, 35, or 36 instead. But Ben and Mikel and James from Planet FPL are all predicting that it's going to be in game week 31. So probable double for Brighton and Newcastle coming up. I've already got 5 assets from those two teams, so I'm probably going to try and hold on to all 5 of those. After that, we have a small blank game week in game week 32. As you can see, Brighton, Chelsea, Man United, and Man City, the 4 teams that are likely to blank. A lot of us own a lot of players from those teams, so I do think that this is one of the better opportunities to free hit. So as we'll discuss when we move on to whether I think you should free hit or wildcard this week, it is one benefit of saving the free hit in 28 is that I probably think for a lot of our teams in the way that they're set up, especially if you've wildcarded recently, I think you might struggle slightly in 32 to field a full team. And I do think there are some other really nice fixtures to attack. So 32 is a small blank, but quite a difficult blank to navigate. And then we're likely to have, well, we are going to have double game weeks in game week 34 and game week 37. As you can see, Brighton are confirmed to have doubles in both 34 and 37. Man City are almost definitely going to have doubles in both. And the likes of Manchester United, Fulham, West Ham, Liverpool, and Chelsea are also likely to have doubles in one or both. So you can see there, a lot of the teams that we already have, a lot of the players that we already have will have doubles in 34 and 37. So I don't necessarily think that will be that tricky to navigate. 32, I do think will be tricky to navigate. But I don't think you really need a wildcard. After game week 30, that isn't to say that a wildcard won't do well for your team. I just don't think you'll necessarily need it in any of the weeks. I think you can just get by with free transfers and the odd hit. So basically, as I'm starting to lean towards, but we'll move on to that in a second, I think the free hit could be useful for 32. I don't necessarily think there's much value in holding on to the wildcard if you haven't already used it. So that's the upcoming landscape. If we just switch over to now, basically my thoughts around game week 28 chips, I've just put a few things down that I wanted to talk about. I don't think that as you'll see in a second, I don't think that the wildcard team for game week 28 is actually that different to the free hit team for 28. Now, that, in my opinion, means that probably I would wildcard this week rather than free hit. The reason for that is if you can get what a free hit would give you, but also set your team up well long term, why would you not just wildcard? And it means you get to save the free hit, essentially, because the value in playing the free hit for this week would be to get you a much higher score than you originally would. But if you can achieve that with a wildcard and set your team up well, it makes no sense for me to value the free hit instead of the wildcard. This is, of course, assuming you have both. I probably wouldn't use the free hit, even if you've used a wildcard, I probably wouldn't use the free hit unless you've got kind of 7 or less players, but I don't think quantity is that important. For me, it's the quality. So let's say you only have 7 or 8 players, but also you're missing a lot of the key players. Maybe you don't have one of like Saka and Kane. You're also missing a second Arsenal midfielder. Maybe one of your 7 or 8 players is someone like a Nico Williams who you don't know is going to start. If it's starting to add up that, yes, you maybe have 7 or 8 players, which isn't a massive issue, but those players aren't even that good, that's when you're starting to move towards free hit territory. Otherwise, I don't necessarily think it's that valuable for this week. As you can see, if I only had the wildcard, let's say that was the only chip I had left, I would probably play it this week. And if not this week, I would play it in 29. I don't really see the value in keeping that through. If I only had the free hit, if that was the only chip I had, I would still be tempted by 28 and 29. But I would have it in the back of my mind that if my team was well set up for 28 and 29, and maybe you can put out a decent team this week, maybe I would keep it for game week 32, because I do think that could be tricky to navigate, despite the fact there's only going to be 4 teams blanking. And then if I had all of the chips left, ignoring triple captain, because you can just play that whenever you want to, the ideal chip strategy for me, if you still have wildcard, free hit, and bench boost, would be, I don't know why I've put bench boost 29 there. It'd be wildcard 28, free hit 20, bench boost 29, and then free hit 32. Right, so wildcard 28, bench boost 29, free hit 32. I think for me, that's probably the ideal strategy if you have all 3 left. I don't dislike free hit 28, bench boost 29, and then wildcard a bit later. But like I said, I just don't really see the value in wildcarding much later. I don't see a clear fixture swing, and I don't see that gaining much value for you. So I would wildcard this week, bench boost next week, free hit 32. Let me know down below what your current chip situation is, what you're planning on doing to navigate the upcoming weeks. I really do like a wildcard this week, and I think if I still had the wildcard left, unless your team is already very well set up, because I do know a few people that just have a perfect team for this week despite still having the wildcard. Unless it's really, really good already, I would probably just play the wildcard this week, get it done, save the free hit, and probably bench boost in game week 29. So we're going to start with free hit because it's a little bit more straightforward. You're just changing your team for 1 week, and you can have some real fun with it. And the team that I'm presenting here, I do think is a really good team. Feel free to use it to inspire your team, but also pick some fun players as well, because I think the free hit is the one you don't have to carry these players moving forward. FPL kind of punishes you if you take too many risks and pick too many differentials, because then you have transfers down the line, especially if they're minutes risk. But in a free hit team, you can take a few risks and have a few nice punts in there. So this team is going along with that, but it is also a relatively safe team too. The idea behind this is to mainly target those London team fixtures. You can see I've got 2 Chelsea players in the starting 11. I've got a triple Arsenal. I've got double Spurs. And I also have Tony from Brentford too. I think those are actually really nice fixtures for this week. But I've also tried sort of attacking those high upside players. So the likes of James and Chilwell, you could have Kepa instead, or you could have Kepa alongside them in the starting 11. I just feel like at the moment, James and Chilwell have a higher ceiling than Kepa does. And Ramsdale, I think, has a very similar ceiling to the likes of Zinchenko, Gabriel, White, Saliba, whoever it may be. So I think for me, I prefer the James Chilwell Ramsdale combo than something like a Kepa Chilwell Zinchenko. But I do think it's very close, but that's something that could differentiate you slightly. I do still have Trippier in there, but I don't actually dislike going for someone like a Matty Cash against Bournemouth at home if you want to. Just mixing up and dropping Trippier. Or like I said, you could go for Zinchenko anyway and have like James Zinchenko and Chilwell and then go for Nick Pope in goal. I don't mind mixing it up, the combinations of players in that defence. For me, Chilwell's a no-brainer. James, assuming his fit is good, and then just have a decent first sub just in case. And I think Ramsdale and Trippier are nice options too. The midfield feels like it has a lot of upside as well. I do have James Maddison in there. I've got a bit of a soft spot for him. He's in my team. You don't necessarily need to pick him yourself. I do feel like he is a player that has a high ceiling though. He can get a goal and an assist very, very easily. And I think Brentford away isn't an easy fixture, but it's not a terrible one either. And I think the midfield's actually pretty tricky because there feels like a lack of really decent options just for game week 28 on a free hit. So at the moment, Maddison makes his way in. I do think you probably want at least 2 Arsenal midfielders against Crystal Palace at home. They are struggling both defensively and offensively at the moment. Who you pick alongside Saka is difficult because I think Martinelli has the highest ceiling, but Jesus is now back. Trossard is playing very well too. How many minutes is Martinelli going to get? But I guess you could say Saka could come off early too. I feel like Saka and Ødegaard are the safer pairing, but Martinelli just looks so good at the moment. I would probably be on Saka and Martinelli, especially on a free hit. Then the fourth and final midfielder is actually Heung-min Son. This is a bit of a funky punt. I mean, he did score recently, of course, but I just feel like this is a bit of an exciting one. Picking Son against Southampton away. You don't want to own Son long-term. You don't want to own a double premium Spurs attack long-term, but in a free hit, I do like it. And we know what Son can do on his day. He's been absolutely woeful this season. So have Spurs at points. But I just feel like it's a bit of a fun punt on the free hit. And again, I don't see any other midfielders that I particularly would want for this week. The front three is relatively template. I've got Watkins, Tony, and Kane. As you'll see when we look at the wildcard draft in a second, on a wildcard, I actually wouldn't have Tony because of the 9 yellow cards. If he picks up a yellow card in game week 28, he misses both games in game week 29. So I think for that reason, I would maybe look elsewhere because I like the likes of Havertz, João Felix. I don't even mind Iheanacho and Isak. I think there are a lot of other options that I quite like in the attack. But if you're only going to have a Game Week 28 free hit, it doesn't matter if Tony picks up a booking, because then you can move him out in Game Week 29. So I would be going for Tony against Leicester at home. Watkins against Bournemouth at home feels like a bit of a no-brainer situation. And in a similar way, I think Kane against Southampton away is too. Because I've got money in the bank, I've also got a relatively strong bench. I've got Kepa as the backup goalkeeper. You could put him in instead of Ramsdale and go for the triple up on the Chelsea defence. I've got Matty Cash and Bailey from Aston Villa. You could pick whoever you want in those spots. And then I've just got Botman as a decent third sub that you almost definitely won't need. So I know I've flown through that, but I think you really should trust your gut feeling and have some fun. That isn't to say choose stupid players that have never returned and have got really poor data, but pick 7, 8 of the obvious players, the likes of Kane, Saka, Chilwell. They feel like fairly straightforward picks, but feel free to spice it up. In that Reece James spot, feel free to pick whoever you want. In that maybe Tony spot, go for an Isak, go for a João Felix, because I don't think you should be forced, especially on a free hit, into being too template and too safe. It's the most fun chip, especially in a single game week like this. So this is the free hit team I would go for. Let me know down below if you think it's terrible or if you disagree with any of these picks. Let me know if you're playing your free hit this week. Now let's move on to the wildcard, because I think that requires a little bit more thought, because obviously you're permanently changing your team moving forward. So now moving on to the Game Week 28 wildcard team. It's actually not too dissimilar from the free hit team, but I do obviously have blanking players on the bench. The bench isn't as strong, and I'm not purely focusing on Game Week 28. I'm also trying to put together a team that is good for 29, and also you could possibly bench boost to, which we'll discuss, and also looks good for 30 and beyond, because this is the last time you can permanently change your team. It isn't also too dissimilar to the Game Week 26 and Game Week 27 wildcard teams. That is why we wildcarded in Game Week 26 and 27, because we knew for Game Week 28 and 29, the teams wouldn't change too much. So I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, because we've spoken about a lot of these players in detail already. I do have triple Chelsea, Kepa, Chilwell and Havertz. I think they are the best 3 Chelsea assets to own long term. You could replace Kepa or Havertz with Reece James. I just feel like at the moment Chilwell looks really good. He looks fit as well, which is good. We don't want those players getting injured and being forced into making loads of changes. I think Kepa is still decent. He's not making as many passes and he's not making as many saves, which means not as many bonus points. But I still feel like he's fairly safe at 4.7. And I have no real need to go for any other keeper, in my opinion. And Havertz just feels like a bit of a spicy pick. You could pick Tony in there. You could pick Isak. Like I said, you could pick João Felix. I like the fact that Havertz is showing really decent data at a 0.65 non-penalty expected goal involvement. And he's on penalties too. And he looks pretty nailed in that sort of 3-4-3 formation that Chelsea are rocking at the moment. So for those reasons, I like Kepa, Chilwell, and Havertz. I think double Newcastle defence makes a lot of sense. I've seen some people on triple Newcastle defence. I don't dislike it. It's a good fixture this week, a decent double. And again, Newcastle are just really strong defensively this year. I have the Arsenal triple up. Zinchenko, Ødegaard, Saka. I've gone for Ødegaard as opposed to Martinelli here, just because I feel like with Ødegaard, he's the slightly better option long term. I feel like Martinelli in a single week probably has a slightly higher upside than Ødegaard and has slightly better underlying data, more of a goal threat. But with Jesus and Trossard coming back, I just feel like Martinelli's minutes are probably slightly lower than Ødegaard's moving forward. You might end up selling that Arsenal midfielder anyway in Game Week 29, but just in case you don't, I prefer Ødegaard for the safety of minutes slightly. And I think Zinchenko versus Gabriel is pretty much a 50-50 call. Zinchenko's got slightly better data, but Gabriel's a slightly bigger goal threat. So it really is up to you. I think both are great. Gabriel's slightly more nailed, but I feel like Zinchenko's just got a slightly higher ceiling moving forward. I know Gabriel's just recently scored. I still just about prefer Zinchenko. I do have Maddison in there. You know, I'm a bit of a Maddison fanboy, as I said in the previous section. But again, really good fixture in 28, or a decent fixture in 28, and a really nice double in 29. I actually think he's a decent captaincy option. If he was on penalties, or we had it confirmed he was on penalties, I would be very tempted to captain in Game Week 29. So I really like Maddison. Moving on to the front 3 that are in the starting 11, I do have Kane, Watkins and Havertz, like I said here. It's not too dissimilar from the free hit team. I've just gone for Havertz instead of Tony. I do really like Isak in there as well as an option if you want to go for someone slightly different. I'm just not sure how secure Isak's minutes are in comparison to the likes of Watkins and Havertz. I do feel like Havertz is potentially a transfer waiting to happen, but that's not really an issue because remember, in Game Week 30, I'm going to want to do one of Kane, Watkins or Havertz to Haaland. And I think Havertz is probably the one that's most likely to make way, just because Kane and Watkins are both definitely on penalties and very, very nailed. I think a front 3 of Kane, Watkins and Haaland is really good moving forward. So Watkins at the moment is probably just a 2-week placeholder, so I have no real issue with picking him there. As you can see, I have 3 blanking players on the bench: McAllister, Rashford and Estepinian. Brighton have 4 double game weeks still coming this season, 29, probably 31, 34 and 37. And Rashford is just an excellent option for double game week 29 too. So I want to keep at least 2 Brighton assets. I want to keep Rashford. And then I've just got Ward on the bench as the keeper because I think he's a decent cheap goalkeeper. And I also think he's decent for the bench boost in game week 29. So that is the game week 28 wildcard draft. I know I've flown through that, but I think a lot of these picks are fairly obvious. It hasn't changed too much from game week 26. I'm just going with a couple of slightly different options long term, maybe a couple of safer options in comparison to the free hit. Now let's just take a very, very brief look at how this team would look for a potential bench boost in 29 and for game week 30 and beyond as well. So very briefly, if you do rock with that wildcard draft that I showed you or something similar, just to kind of look at how it looks for the coming game weeks, this is what it would look like in game week 28. Captaincy, we are going to discuss in detail on the deadline stream, I'm sure. It doesn't really matter at this stage. So this is how the team will look for 28. Moving forward into 29, you do have 6.2 million in the bank, but I think you want to make sure that you have the ability to do any of Havertz or Kane or Watkins back to Haaland. So you want to make sure that you leave some money in the bank. If you don't make any transfers, because you would only obviously have one at this stage that's free, this is the way the team would look. So you have 11 double game week players, including Ward on the bench, assuming you want a bench boost here. You've got Kane in the starting 11 as a single game week player, and then you've got triple Arsenal on the bench for a potential bench boost with single game week. I don't mind bench boosting with 3 Arsenal on the bench. I think they should do fairly well against Leeds at home. Leeds have not been brilliant in recent weeks. Their data's not particularly strong either. But I do think there is the possibility to make 1 or 2 transfers. I think one transfer which I don't mind at all is to do Zinchenko to potentially another player. The issue is I think it's probably Luke Shaw that would be the best option. But obviously Casemiro is now suspended for game week 29. So I'm less convinced by Luke Shaw and by the Manchester United defence. I don't mind Reece James, but if you go with the team that I've suggested, you've already got Kepa, Chilwell and Havertz. The other options you've got is to do one of Saka or Odegaard to another midfielder. It could be Harvey Barnes, it could be Bowen, it could be Bruno Fernandes, but you just want to make sure that you have the money in the bank to do Haaland. So it would probably be Saka that you would sell if you wanted to go for Bruno. Again, though, with Casemiro suspended, is Bruno going to be playing a slightly deeper role? Is he going to have to be doing more defending? And how good are Manchester United going to be in their build-up play? So I think I would be going for something like Odegaard to Bowen, Benrahma, I think is a decent option, although his minutes are slightly lower than Bowen's, or potentially a Harvey Barnes, something like that. But let's just say you make no moves. For game week 30, the team's not perfect because you've got your double Brighton against Tottenham, who you don't probably want to play too much. And then you do have Arsenal against Liverpool. I don't think that's a terrible fixture, but I don't think the team looks perfect for game week 30. It looks decent enough. At this stage, like I said, though, you would be bringing Haaland back in. Unless you want to go without Haaland long term, which I probably don't recommend, it would be bringing Haaland back in. I think you would want to keep Kane. I think you would want to keep Watkins. So it probably would be Havertz out, Haaland in. You've got 1.6 million in the bank. I would probably captain Haaland. And again, you probably would have taken out someone for someone for Odegaard. So that Odegaard spot may well have been, let's just say that you did it for Harvey Barnes. I don't know who it would be at this stage, but let's just say rather than having Odegaard here, you go for Harvey Barnes instead. And you probably bring Harvey Barnes in. And your bench boost is probably something like that. And then going forward to next week, the team looks a bit better. You've got double Leicester attack against Bournemouth at home. You've got to play Saka against Liverpool, which isn't a massive issue. Team looks fairly decent. For game week 31, again, the team looks pretty strong. You would probably bring Zinchenko back in at this stage, maybe for Harvey Barnes. Pretty decent team. And then if you've still got the free hit, I would probably then use the free hit in 32 because you've got Chilwell, Kepa, Haaland, Rashford, McAllister, Estepinian, a minimum of 6 players that blank. You've also got Botman and Trippier against Spurs, and you've got Kane there, so there's a bit of a clash. So if you still got the free hit, I would probably want to play it in 32. If you don't have the free hit, just have that in the back of your mind that 32 could become quite tricky to navigate. So that's the way roughly that the wildcard team would look. Just go back to game week 28, just to give you a reminder of what it is. I think it's fairly template, it's fairly standard, but I wouldn't try and reinvent the wheel. I wouldn't try and completely mix it up too much. Maybe just throw a couple of spicy picks in there instead. So guys, there you have it. That is a bonus piece of content here on my channel. I don't usually upload on the same day of the deadline because it's probably not great for views. So if you do appreciate this bonus piece of content that is basically aimed at helping you out, please do drop a like. Let's try and hit 2,000 likes on today's video. Might be slightly optimistic. And drop a comment down below as well to feed those algorithm gods. Make sure to subscribe. We are very close to 65,000 subscribers. But until next time, thanks very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.